All right, everyone. Today I have a special guest, a life coach, Rebecca Scotland, for the story of a somebody. Rebecca, tell us where you're from.
I am from upstate New York, but I have lived kind of all over the eastern coast of the United States.
Okay, interesting. Are you guys going to get the snowstorm?
We are supposed to get the snow tomorrow.
Yours starts tonight. I just got back home in time for it to start. Yeah, I live in Indiana, so we're going to get hit before you, but yeah.
Yeah. We had a bad storm last week where we about 2 miles away from us had a foot of snow.
Oh, really?
Yes.
My goodness. I don't know. I'm
Best
kind of used to it though, aren't you?
I am. I am. It was a little funny going from New York, moving down to like the DC area and Virginia area, seeing how
Uh-huh.
they dealt with snow down there versus how places like New York and the East Coast, northern East Coast deal with it. It's just like, this is 8 inches of snow. You're shut down for 2 days.
I seen a friend of mine that lives in California. They literally got this much snow. She was like, "I'm not driving."
A friend of mine's a police officer in DC, and I'll never forget. I was staying at his house for a week when I was visiting, and he's like, I can't go to work today. I'm like, why not? It's snowing out. There was like 3 or 4 inches of snow on the ground.
Well, let's get started, Rebecca. I have you here today because, well, you seem like an incredible person. I did do a little background work on you about your life coach stuff, but I couldn't find, I didn't know where the website was or your YouTube channel. So can you tell us where to find like some of your vlog work and stuff?
Well, the YouTube channel I am just starting. I
Okay.
just posted my second video, which was just a short video today because I've been dealing with a lot of victims, and a lot of them have been telling me that the legal system is actually doing more damage to them than the initial attacks.
Okay, yeah, I'm just getting my YouTube started as well. But what if they wanted to contact you? How do people get a hold of you?
I typically get a lot of messages through my Instagram account right now, my Facebook account right now. I do have a website up that is still kind of like, it's not quite finished, but it is in the process of getting everything finalized. There's still some tweaks I have to make on that and add a couple of things on that as well.
And that's okay. So take us back to the beginning. Tell us about young Rebecca.
Young Rebecca. Young Rebecca was a very, very interesting Rebecca because a lot of kids didn't understand me. My father passed away when I was 6 years old in front of me. My parents always had this huge rule that we couldn't go downstairs unless one of the parents went downstairs. And that was for my nieces if they were staying, or just me because I was the only child at that time in the house. Normally, my mom would get up in the morning first and I'd go cuddle with my dad. This morning, my father had gotten up first, and I was so excited because I don't get a lot of time with my dad. He was very active. He was an Elks Club member, Lions Club member, business owner. If I saw him an hour or two a day, that was it.
Wow, busy
So
guy.
So for me, that time with him was so exciting. I followed him downstairs and he was laying on the couch looking at my picture and his picture. And I was like, okay, I'm like, he's just going to back to sleep. I thought maybe his back hurt. And my mom came downstairs and she shooed me back upstairs. And then she ended up calling the ambulance. My father was having a massive heart attack in front of me, and he actually passed away on the couch looking at my picture.
Oh my goodness. Do you believe in ghosts? Do you feel like your dad is still around you?
I do feel like he's around me a bit. I honestly feel like I feel my grandmother more than him.
Oh, okay. Okay. I believe in that stuff. I'm just not really in tune with it. I need to meditate or practice or something like that. But tell me about elementary school. Like, were you ever bullied? Did your parents battle a drug or alcohol problem?
So for me with elementary school, I did end up getting bullied quite a bit because it ended up being just my mom and I. Very poor, single family income. And it was basically living off of survivor's benefits because my mom got cancer shortly after my father passed away. It started off as skin cancer right here on her face. She had that removed probably about 7 months after my father had passed away. That had come back a couple of times. She had to have that removed a couple of times. In the process of dealing with all of that, my mom sold the house that my parents had bought together, and I moved school districts. So I ended up starting at a completely different school district in third grade. And there I was really kind of an outcast because I was one of the few that was a single parent household. And my mom was also extremely controlling after my father passed away. My father was a little bit of the buffer in that. So I wasn't allowed to have friends unless she approved of them. I was never allowed to go to a friend's house for more than an hour or two. Forget spending a night at a friend's house. I wasn't allowed to go to birthday parties. So I was very much bullied and an outcast in elementary school and even middle school and high school.
Even through high school, you were bullied.
Even through high school, I was bullied.
Did you ever try drugs or alcohol in middle school? Kiss a boy? Tell us some juicy stuff.
I did not, because I was so I wasn't allowed to have friends. So even trying to get that kind of interaction with boys was not happening in middle school.
Gotcha.
So that made it very difficult for me. And then when I did start working in high school, I got my first job at 14 and I was working at a restaurant. My mom would literally sit at my job and watch me work the entire time.
I don't understand that.
The only thing that came of that was really good was somebody that became one of my best friends at that time. He was a little bit older than me. We worked together, but my mom really approved of him and kind of adopted him in as a son. That was the only way I was able to leave the house, even like to go see a movie or anything.
Mom had a tight grip on you.
It was a point where it was abusive. I wasn't allowed to ride my bike beyond a certain section of the driveway. I wasn't allowed to leave a certain section of the yard, even as a teenager. I couldn't even go across the street to the neighbor's house.
Goodness. Now that you're a life coach, like, what do you think that meant for your mom? Like, she just was afraid to lose you, or?
I think part of it was her afraid to lose me. Part of it was a combination of the experience she had with her oldest kids, which my youngest brother, closest to my age, is a little over 20 years older than me. They were already out of the house by the time I was born. I was kind of the oops baby, the one that was never supposed to happen.
Gotcha.
My sister even told me that when she was drunk. She had a very bad alcohol problem when I was young. And she went on a 3-day drinking binge. My uncle had to carry her out of the bar. And she looked at me and told me I was never supposed to be born a girl. I was supposed to be born a boy. And she dreamt of taking me in the woods and killing me so she could be the only girl again.
Oh my God. Oh my goodness. Wow.
And then
that's even traumatizing to hear.
And that's what my home life was like. Just hearing that. My one brother was in and out of jail constantly. He had a bad drug problem. He had a lot of issues with his wife. I remember even being 16 at that time, and because my mom couldn't drive his car. She was 5 foot tall. You could not drive his car if you were under 5'6". You could not reach the pedals. Every time he would get arrested, I would get told, "We have to go get your brother's car." And I would have to drive the thing home.
Interesting. Interesting, yeah.
And I think as a middle schooler and elementary school, seeing all the effects that the drugs had on my brothers and sisters, I didn't want to touch them. But then when my mom's battle had turned terminal and I was the sole provider for taking care of her because I had no help from my brothers or sisters, with the exception of some very, very traumatic experiences in that as well. She that's kind of when I started smoking, and then once she passed away, I turned to drinking and harder drugs just as my coping mechanism.
Gotcha. Did you ever need help getting clean, or
Uh
just something you just like got tired of and just didn't do it anymore?
I I drank myself sober a few times
Mm.
when I was 19. And I think at the last time I did it, I should have died of alcohol poisoning, and I
Oh
kind
my
of
God,
scared
lady.
myself. I really scared myself with that one. It's
Scared yourself straight.
yes, I really did. I can't say I gave up the drugs completely at that point, but I definitely cut back on them as well.
Gotcha.
Um,
Gotcha. So you were like a functioning addict or just
I was I can't say I was an addict, but I was definitely drinking every night as a coping mechanism.
gotcha.
I was 19 hanging out in bars getting free
Yeah,
drinks by guys. Should not have been drinking at all.
you're
Should not
right.
have legal age. Not
Right.
even close. So, and then I was also dealing with another trauma that I never had told anyone about. The one person I tried to tell about it was my mom, and my mom didn't believe me. So it kind of,
Isn't that the worst when your own parents don't even believe you?
well, I kind of got sick of the fact that because through my first 3 jobs, she would sit at my job the entire time watching me. Like I couldn't even go to the bathroom without her needing to know where I was. It was really bad. So I ended up the restaurant I was working at, we had a regular customer who owned a horse farm. And my mom used to sit at a table with him. We always called it the community table. There was probably about 10 or 15 regulars that would just sit at the table throughout the day. They would talk, they would do crossword puzzles and all of that. And I always thought, well, this is great for mom because it gives her some interaction and it takes her attention. So I can actually wait on tables and not have her like all up trying to see what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And he ended up offering me a job there, and she thought that would be great because she didn't want me around so many people. She thought me being around horses and only horses would be perfect because then she didn't have to worry about me talking to people.
Mm.
So she was all for it. The job had a lot of good experiences for me and a lot of bad experiences for me. The boss and his wife really saw how controlling my mom was and tried putting their foot down with a lot of it. Like things like I wasn't allowed to go to my prom. My mom didn't want me to have my driver's license. I pushed myself to graduate high school at 16 to try to have my grandmother see me graduate, but she ended up passing away a few months before my graduation. I wasn't allowed to go away to college. My mom wanted me to take a year or two off to even go to college.
I, just coming hearing this kind of reminds me of my experience, and I don't want to talk about myself, but I remember running away from home because I just felt like my parents were controlling me too much. I ended up running away from home. But so, what happened with your new boss? I mean, like, did they threaten to fire you if she didn't leave you alone or anything like that?
Well, my boss had kind of started becoming a father figure to me, so I was
Mhm.
opening up to him a little bit more because he would see a lot of the stuff that was happening between when I worked at the restaurant and then when I worked there because she would do the same thing. She would try sit there at their house
Mhm.
while I was working. So it finally got to the point where my boss's wife really tried like you can't keep doing this. This is not good. And so
It's
she
not normal.
started easing up a little bit where I would be allowed to work 1 day a week without her staying at the job.
Uh,
And, then it was my boss was, "Okay, well, your mom's not here. We're gonna teach you how to drive. We're gonna give you driving lessons." So he started taking up all the things that my mom was trying to prevent me from learning,
Gotcha.
which I thought was great. But then at the same time, it turned into something else. I've kind of realized after the fact it was him grooming me because about 8 months after all of that started was the first time he had raped me.
Oh my goodness. It just feels
And
like he probably just picked you out of the restaurant, like you were probably an easy target. They prey
yep.
on naive people and
Well, he also at first it really did start as help, and a lot of things changed because of that job. But at the same, then once that started happening, and I tried to tell my mom about it, she just didn't believe he would do something like that because he used to come to our house and have coffee with her once a week and everything else. So it was like he's a friend, he wouldn't do that.
did you ever try to tell his wife?
Oh, she took more of the stance of it's none of your business what my husband and I do.
Oh my goodness. So how long did the abuse go on?
It went on for about 8 months before I was able to leave that job. We were kind of in a situation where with my mom still having cancer and just living off of survivor's benefits, we
Hmm.
needed the money to even pay for heating in the winter sometimes.
Yeah.
So I was kind of stuck there
Hmm.
and dealing
Enduring
with it
it.
for 8 months.
How old were you when that happened?
16.
16 years old. Did you ever receive therapy or counseling or do anything?
The most I ever had was antidepressants. I tried talking to someone, and that was kind of the doctor's response. He gave me antidepressants because it was, oh, your mom passed away. This happened, and this happened. You're just depressed.
So their answer was pills.
Their answer was pills, but I also lived in a very rural area. I think
Yeah.
the county I lived in had a total of 25,000 people.
That's a small town.
That's not even the town, that's the county. My personal
Oh,
town was only 3,000 people. There was
oh my
7
goodness.
towns in this county that equaled that many people.
Gotcha. And times were different then, I mean, the
Times were
times were a little
very
bit different
different,
then.
and
Yeah.
in our area, there wasn't really any therapists unless you were admitted to the psychiatric unit of the hospital.
Yeah. So
So,
what happens to you after that? I mean, how do you deal with it? I mean, do you make bad decisions after that? I mean, it affects people.
it I kind of just tried dealing with it and burying it for a few years, especially while mom was sick.
Yeah.
Um, I will say, like, my boss did, and his wife did fight to allow me to at least get to the local community college, so I was able to continue my schooling after. And I used college as the best reason. I'm like, with my schedule, I can't work here.
Yeah.
So I was able to use them helping me get into college to leave the job so I could get away from the abuse as well.
So no, you never prosecuted or mom never pressed charges or anything.
The thing is with the town, he was a pillar of the community as well. He did a lot of stuff for the community. Nobody wanted to believe he would do something like that.
Yeah, it's your word against his.
And he was also a former police officer in another area. So
I believe you.
I almost feel like he had to leave being a police officer because of him doing stuff down where he was a police officer, and that's what made him move to a completely different area and start a completely different career.
Not just that, you're probably not his only victim.
I don't think I'm his only victim. I think I am the one that he fixated on the most.
Gotcha.
And
So,
I definitely had experiences with that after my mom passed away, which was about 3 years after I'd left that job. Um, I I was with a friend of mine, and he's like, "Well, let's go to my friend's house." And I'm like, "Okay, that's fine. No big deal." And that's a time I was really heavily drinking because it was shortly after my mom had passed away. I didn't know his friend was my former boss's son.
oh God.
So he ended up like he kind of recognized me from being there. Like we talked a little bit, but I didn't really talk about his dad at all. I didn't want to touch that subject at all.
Hmm.
Saw him a couple of weeks later. We ended up hanging out again. And he's like, "Oh, I told my dad I saw you. He said to offer his condolences. He wanted to approach you at your mom's funeral, but he seen you huddled up with your brothers and he didn't want to interrupt the moment."
Hmm.
I knew he had to have been there because of the way it was described, because it was one specific moment at my mom's burial service that was described.
What a sicko.
And that was even 3 years after the fact. So he's, like, going to my mom's funeral 3 years after I got away from that situation, so there was definitely, I think, more of a fixation on me than
A
other
way to reach
people.
out to you. Try to reach out to you. Yeah.
Yeah. It's kind of scary to think about it. And I think the worst part about that is the situation that he had described to me
Mhm.
was my one brother who was he was there for mom as much as possible while she was dying. He lived 2.5 hours away. He had 3 young kids of his own.
Mhm.
He would visit as much as he could. There was one night she was really bad. He had come up and spent the night and helped me, which I was super appreciative of. My sister was standing across from us. She's like 4'11". So where he had been standing, he wouldn't have seen my sister because she was like literally hidden between the three of us.
Mhm.
She came 1 week to help with mom during the 6 months that I was taking care of her. I think it was the third day that she was taking care of him or taking care of her. The guy I had been dating at the time drove past the house and came to our job because we worked together.
Mhm.
And he would help me at night too because he said it was too much. I couldn't lift up on my mom on my own and
Yeah.
that. So he would help me literally pick her up so she could use the bathroom and that. I did all the privacy things, but he did the heavy lifting for me, which was great. He's like, he comes to my job. He's like, is everything okay with your mom? Is everything okay with your mom? The lights are off and your sister's car's not there. And mom was in hospice. She wasn't supposed to be home alone. I threw him my keys. He went to the house. He got in there. She was laying on the floor. She had tried to use the bathroom by herself and collapsed. We don't know how long she had been laying on the floor at that point. He called me up at work. My boss let me leave immediately. And we were sitting there for about 3.5 hours before my sister and her husband came back home. And she came home drunk and literally looked at me and she goes, "Oh, what are you doing here?" And I told her, I'm like, taking care of mom the way you were supposed to. Like I've
Mhm.
been doing for the last few months. And she went, "Oh, my friend Kenny was just diagnosed with stage 1 cancer, and it was really important that we went out and supported him." And I just looked at her. I'm like, your mom has less than 2 months to live. Your friend has completely treatable cancer. You couldn't have gone and seen him during the day when the hospice nurses were here. You had to go out drinking and leave your mom alone.
Yeah.
And it was at that point I kind of decided that I was done with my sister and she was no longer family.
I was about to ask you if you still have a relationship with your siblings.
I do not have a relationship with my sister at all. There was other things like she had stopped talking to our mom for 3 years because my mom wouldn't take custody of her kids. But
Mhm.
again, mom was battling cancer. She didn't know how long she had to live. She couldn't take on more minors. She literally had to make arrangements for me in case she passed away before I was 18 and I was going to get shipped to Texas to live with my aunt,
Yeah.
which was one of the few surviving relatives that I had at that time because most of my family had passed away by the time I was 16.
So, tell me how you become a life coach.
Actually, it was kind of I started helping friends with situations that they were dealing with, relationships, being
Mhm.
abused, narcissistic abuse especially. I was helping them with their situations, and one of my friends told me that I should kind of make a career out of it, and I laughed at her because I was very heavily in the accounting field. My father was a tax accountant. It there was pictures of me at 2 years old filling out tax forms in my diapers. Like it was in my blood is what I
I
used to
see.
say. And numbers were always in my blood. My kids still call me a human calculator because they'll give me numbers they'll be like, "What's this minus this plus this?" And I'll give them the answer, or "What's 15% of this?" And I'll just pop out the answer real quick. So
You're
numbers
smart in the
came easy to
mathematics
me.
department.
Yes. And so I kind of fell into doing accounts payable and all of that because it was just easy for me, but it didn't feel fulfilling. It was
Mm-hmm.
just a way of making ends meet, and I'd always been driven to help people even from a young age. I think that was partly ingrained in me just because I did spend most of my childhood taking care of my mom too. So
It's
that's
in your
kind of
blood.
it's in my blood. Um, I did help out my brother for a little while too until his drug use had gotten so bad that I kind of had to cut ties with him as well.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Him and I had a falling out too when mom was sick. It was the last week she was alive, and it was the week we had to put her in the hospital. It was her dying wish to not die there, so we had tried as best we could to keep her out of the hospital. But it got to the last week we couldn't. And I remember him calling me at work and telling me I didn't know how bad mom was. He hadn't seen her the entire time she was sick until she was in the hospital.
That's sad too.
So, and then he started dealing with issues with that when he realized I was the only one. So he tried being the brother that I deserved for a few years.
Mm-hmm.
And then his wife had passed away, and our sister, I think this is when he was done with her too. When she was in the ER and they were about to pull her off of life support because she had a DNR. My sister spoke to my brother, and my brother's bawling his eyes out, and my sister told him, I never liked the B word anyway, you're better off.
Wow.
And that sent him down a dark spiraling path of really bad drugs, alcohol abuse. He ended up in jail for about 4 years again. Him and I stopped talking when he was going to jail because I refused to take custody of his 13 cats.
My God. 13 cats. You know,
13 cats. That was his coping mechanism.
his way to cope with his trauma was drugs and alcohol, and you're choosing to be a life coach to help other people inspire other people. The same thing I do. I'm not a life coach, but I'm thinking about taking the classes. Sounds like something I want to do too. Yeah.
So the one thing I've found is you have to be very careful with this classes for life coaching is because the certifications are just in their methodology of
Oh,
coaching. So you have to be
gotcha.
very careful when you're researching that. You're getting certified in teaching that person's method of
I
coaching.
understand. Yeah. Hey, thank you for the tip.
You're
So,
welcome.
how long have you been doing life coach?
I have switched into being a full-time life coach as my career officially in August, and I left my job in accounts payable in September. So I've been doing that full-time for the last 4 or 5 months, but I have been doing it part-time over the last few years.
Gotcha. So
I've
it's going good for you.
Yes.
Good.
And for what I've been finding locally for me, at least in my area, and it's kind of funny, a lot of the people that have started reaching out to me, like I've has gotten in touch with me through some of our friends and mutual friends, and that it's people that their daughters are currently being groomed. They were
Hmm.
suspecting grooming in their daughter. I have one woman that she figured out her boyfriend had gotten together with her just to get with her 15-year-old. She had suspected some stuff going on. She discussed it with me. I told her the things to look out for. About 2 weeks later, she got into his phone and discovered pictures, and a whole relationship had been going on between him and his daughter for the last 4 months.
Oh, Lord.
Like
Lord have mercy.
I was just recognizing every single sign that she was
Yeah.
telling me, and so I've been finding it's like I'm bringing awareness more than coaching the last couple of
Oh,
months,
no,
and
you're helping people. Definitely. Definitely. I definitely give you kudos. I'm just wondering, how do you turn that off at night, though? Are you constantly thinking about people's problems? I mean, how do you just shut that off sometimes?
so for me, I try to do yoga or meditate at night for half an hour just to clear my mind.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I definitely found meditation helped me with my own. I would try to meditate once or twice a week when I was going through my own healing process. Well, when I finally decided to do my healing process myself
Yeah.
instead of just burying it and
Yeah.
pretending like it never happened. because that actually got me into a really bad situation when I was 19 because I was drinking, doing drugs, and when I decided like I had to like I'm going to end up in jail or dead if I don't get out of this, I left the area I was living in completely, went down to Washington D.C. I was working overnight at a hotel doing night auditing, and there was a gentleman that came in and decided he was going to rob the hotel at gunpoint, and I ended up being violently raped and almost murdered.
Oh my God, Rebecca.
I, the only thing that saved my life is the fact that the security guard at the hotel was also a police officer, and he was a friend of mine, and he called at the right time.
Yeah.
The my phone started ringing. The guy that literally gun in my face, who is this, who is this? And I'm like, he's the security guard for the hotel. He's also an on-duty police officer right now. If I do not answer that phone, he will be here. So he let me answer the phone. I called him by his nickname that I never called him by. So he started picking up on a couple of things. He was telling me how at the hotel down the street, another girl had just gotten robbed at gunpoint. She worked the front desk as well. And I kind of went, oh, really? Me too. And that's when he really caught on. And he's like, right now? And he's like, I'm on my way. When I hung up, the guy holding the gun in my face, he's like, what was said? What was said? I'm like, oh, he told me that, and I'll use the girl's nickname. He's like, oh, the girl Mousy down at that hotel was just robbed at gunpoint. It's owned by the same owner as this hotel. The police are bringing her up here while they are waiting for the owner to come for an interview. Guy panicked, ran out the door. I was able to lock the door behind him. He ran into about 3 cop cars, tried turning around, running back in, but he was already locked out, and that's how he ended up getting caught. But
Oh my goodness.
even then, like being caught basically in the act, my own journey with the legal system with that was not the best.
I believe you. I believe you.
And I was basically like, oh, we'll do our best, but you're not the perfect victim. I didn't realize there was such a thing as a perfect victim.
So they're victim shaming.
It's basically a lot of what I found is the DA's office, like a lot of them were worried about their conviction rates. So unless you were the perfect victim, they didn't want to pursue a lot of the cases because it could ruin their conviction rates.
So robbery and violent rape is not nothing?
Unless you're the perfect victim that has like nothing in your past, a lot of DAs don't want to touch it.
Wow. I didn't
Because
know that. I'm learning a lot from you today. Wow.
because of the amount of evidence that there was, and the fact that the gentleman had had 2 prior convictions
Mm-hmm.
is what made the DA really go forward with the case, because he's like, even if they try to tear you apart on the stand, which he knew they would, I would have been okay because there was too much evidence.
Yeah.
We went through the grand jury. Once his lawyer found out all the evidence against him and that there was a 3-strike rule possibly about to be hit against him, which could have put him in jail for 25 years, the gentleman accepted a plea bargain for 8 years.
Oh my God. Not enough time
It's
at
not
all.
it's not enough time, but even just going through the grand jury process alone
Yeah.
was almost as traumatizing as the actual event.
I know I've been there myself. I've been to trial before. I know it's not great at all. Especially when you
No.
have to relive it or tell your story in front of everybody again. But
And then when you're told, well, you shouldn't have been working overnight in a hotel room or a hotel, like you shouldn't have been in this situation, like you shouldn't have been doing like in that situation to begin with. It's almost like the DAs are like, well, you kind of brought it on yourself, or the
n-
police officers kind of had the same mentality, like, well, if you hadn't been working overnight in a hotel, this wouldn't have happened. It should have been a guy working here instead of a female.
Well, let's hope their wives never have to work overnight in a hotel
It's
or their
ridiculous.
daughters.
It's ridiculous. And I think what's made me even more passionate about that now is there's one lady I've been working with her mental health, helping her try to really, really like get back to a place where she feels good about herself.
Mm-hmm.
When she went through, she ended up not pressing charges after basically being kind of told the same thing. You're not the perfect victim. She was shamed for being on antidepressants before her attack. Like, people, like, you can't have depression. Like, like, they basically told her, you being depressed is what brought this onto you. If you hadn't been depressed,
Well, how do they expect
if
it?
you had been wearing not quite so tight clothes, this wouldn't have happened to you.
A woman cannot catch a break even in 2022. That's terrible.
No.
How are you supposed to cope with something that happens to you, you know?
And I think it's worse because now the legal system, at least the ones that are doing the victim blaming, we're already dealing with a lot of trauma. We've already had a lot of our rights taken away from us. We've
Mm-hmm.
had stuff forced on us. We're dealing with a lot of mental health issues from that. And then we already feel shame for what has happened to us.
Yeah.
And then when we're being told by police officers and DAs that it's our fault, it makes you internalize that shame even more, and
Yeah.
it destroys your self-worth, which is what it had done to me. And I accepted bad relationships because I didn't feel like I deserved better relationships. My kid's father, the relationship I got in with him, it started off good, but then it turned into an extremely abusive situation. At one point he hit me when I was holding our son, almost dislocated my shoulder, yanked my son out of my arms. I ended up having to go to the hospital the next morning because of that. I
So you were,
couldn't move my arm at all.
oh my God. How long were you guys together?
We were together for about 7 years. He, the first, I can't say the first 2 years were great, but they were okay. Once I had the twins, which my girls will tell me that that was their dad raping me because of the situation with that. I told him to put on protection and he wouldn't. And that's
Mm.
how I got pregnant.
So you're a
But
domestic violence survivor as well.
I am.
Boy,
And
you got a lot of hats over there.
once I got out of that situation, the legal system, even dealing with child custody with him, was absolutely horrible. He, like, and just the abuse he was putting me through towards the end was horrible too. If I wore like knee-high riding boots without a heel, he would tell me I was wearing my hooker boots. I
Wants to
couldn't
control
wear
you.
I couldn't wear a V-neck shirt. If I wore a V-neck shirt, I was trying to sell my goods.
Just another way to control you and manipulate you and gaslight you.
Yes. Yes. And when I did get out of that situation, and then it was the legal battles of custody and all of that, which went on for about 8 years. It we had 50-50 custody. I had the kids 4 days a week. He had the kids 3 days a week.
Mm-hmm.
He had gotten into a not so great relationship. He actually ended up dating the female version of himself.
Oh Lord, that's karma.
Yes. So that part was great, but it was horrible on the kids. My kids were
Yeah.
locked in their room. They weren't allowed to leave their room, even to go to the bathroom.
Abuse.
When the girl, like, if they did leave their room, she would hit them with a broom. She would hit him. My son was allowed to leave the room, but not the girls. She was okay with boys. She did not want him being around a single female, even his own daughters.
Wow, that's terrible. That's a
It got
mental health problem.
it got to the point that the girls said that they didn't want to be there anymore. They didn't want to. They're like, Dad, we love you, but we don't want to be around her anymore. We don't want to
Mm.
come here. At that point, he called them some of the most vile names that I will not even repeat. He was living on Social Security disability at that time, so he was getting checks for the kids to support them. And we were supposed to split school expenses. If I bought $400 worth of school supplies, it would take him 4 months to give me back the $200 that was his half. He
Yeah.
would literally give me $50 a month, even though he was getting over $1,000 a month to support the kids. They
Oh
didn't go to
my
his house
goodness.
for 4 months. He had gotten called for Social Security fraud because he was spending the checks for them on his girlfriend and at the OTB. Social Security finally spoke to my daughter, and when they spoke to her, they yanked all 3 checks from him and told him he could never get them back. At which point he tried taking us to court again, tried taking me to court for theft, tried having petty larceny charges pressed against me. When the
It's
judge
never ending,
basically
huh?
told him he wasn't getting his way, the kid's lawyer got really upset because the kids had already told their lawyer what was going on. The lawyer said, "You're not getting your girls back. If you keep up this act right now, you won't see your son either." And that's what he told him in the waiting room of the court.
He basically chose his girlfriend over his kids.
He did. He did. The only one he was able to see was our son, and that lasted about 9 months. And it was a situation where every other weekend he would have him the full weekend. So he would get him Friday straight through Monday, and then Monday after school he would come back to my house. It worked out well. He would just pick him up Friday after school, and he had him for that.
Mm-hmm.
The weekend that wasn't his weekend, he would pick him up Friday after school and bring him to me on Saturday. It started getting to the point where he would start walking my son to me on Saturdays, even though it was his whole weekend, and dropping him off at my house.
Mm.
And then he just stopped picking up Joshua altogether and seeing him altogether as well. But then, and he had also tried taking us back to court. Oh, and accused me of paying his court-appointed lawyer to fight for me, which the judge laughed out of court and said, "This isn't going to work." And once he realized he couldn't get, and the sad thing is, it really was about the money for him. When he realized he couldn't get the money back, he then told every single teenager in the neighborhood that the girls were no longer there. He kicked them out because he caught them giving blowjobs in their bedroom.
Oh my God. What a horrible piece of shit.
So then they
Sorry.
started getting harassed in school, and we dealt with the mental health system for them because they had PTSD from their father's household, and in dealing with the mental health system, even for them in this area, it was ridiculous. We were on a 6-month waiting list. We were flat out told that unless my kid gets admitted, she's not going to get in any sooner, because what's happening in this area, we don't have enough therapists. So when people are getting released from the psychiatric units or the hospitals, they're getting first priority over the people that are on these waiting lists.
This mental health stuff is something that needs to be changed. I'm dealing with some stuff myself with my oldest daughter. You know, if you're not threatening to kill yourself or threatening to harm anybody else, it's not illegal to walk the streets out of your mind. And that's something that really bothers me a lot. You can't
And
just get automatic help like that. You know, you got to go to the hospital. Maybe they'll put you on a 24-hour hold. It's a whole process.
yep, here they'll do you a 72-hour hold.
I think they do it here too as well. But
The only 24-hour holds they will really do is if they see immediate need and they're going to send you to a inpatient facility that's
yeah,
off of
yeah.
their property.
Anyway, so tell me what life's like for you right now. Or you struggled for a long time with a lot of stuff. You definitely you need a vacation.
So actually, like, once I started the life coaching and like my own healing process, and then I started helping other people, like I found like that just started bringing me so much peace. It brought me a peace that I had never experienced in my life. So and now life coaching, it's more of it's a joy. It doesn't feel like a job to me. So I'm so passionate about what I'm doing. it doesn't feel like work.
And that's when you know it's where you need to be at, is when it doesn't feel like work. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, and I think life coaching kind of helped save me too, because in learning how to be a life coach, I also healed things that I didn't even realize I was holding on to. Things from my own childhood, things from when my father had passed away, things from when my grandmother had passed away, just things like that I just held on to because my coping mechanism as a child was just to internalize everything, because
Mm-hmm.
even at a young age, I was the one being relied on. I couldn't show my emotions. I had to be the strong one and hold it together for everyone to help everyone.
So you're still dealing with your inner child.
I was dealing with my inner child wounds for probably 2 to 3 years. And
Gotcha.
every once in a while, I still have one that'll get triggered when I'm dealing with a patient, but I've gotten to the point now where I recognize the triggers right away. I can
Mhm.
kind of throw it back, finish doing what I'm doing, and then when I have my time, I'll deal with what was triggered. So it's not affecting my day-to-day life. I can like, okay, I know this is going on.
Uh-huh.
Okay, breathe, relax. I'll get through this. Let's finish this. Then I can deal with that.
Definitely.
And
Definitely.
and before it was things would trigger me, and like I would like just end up in a ball crying and not know what was wrong. Like I felt completely lost. I felt alone.
Mm-hmm.
I felt like I had no one I could depend on.
I'm
It
sorry
was
all that stuff happened to you, Rebecca.
it was a very lonely experience, but I
Mm-hmm.
also feel like everything I went through has made me a better coach, because it's also made me a lot more empathic. I understand a lot more on what victims and other people are going through, just having been through those experiences myself. And
Yeah.
there's a couple of people that I work with right now that have therapists as well. And they said their therapist is great, but their therapist doesn't have the empathy and the understanding of having been a victim themselves. So while their therapist is like, oh, those are normal feelings, the therapist doesn't really make them feel like they're normal feelings. And when they're speaking to someone that has been through that, they kind of realize, wait, what I am experiencing is completely normal. The therapist was right. And they're a little bit more willing to attack those issues.
They may stop seeing their therapist and just start seeing you full time.
I do have one person that did that.
It feels better when you can connect with people because they've already been through the same thing as you, or
Yes.
similar, or, things like that. So a therapist, they're just there to give you advice. But I mean, how much advice can they really give you if they've not experienced some of the same traumas?
They definitely, a lot of therapists come to these things with a place of theory, but theory only gets you so far.
Yeah.
The theory is not going to make you understand the true depths of the emotions.
Yep.
And that is something else. Like I one of my YouTube videos that I'm in the process of planning after speaking to a lot of victims is what victims wish non-victims knew, and just the extent of the trauma
Yeah.
that a victim goes through.
Well,
It's
I can tell you it never goes away. And I know you know that. I interviewed a lady, a book author in my local community. She's 73 years old and she's still having trauma from her past experiences in life. 73 years old.
I do like it gets better. I don't think
Yeah.
it ever 100% goes away, but it gets a lot better. It gets to a point where it doesn't affect your day-to-day life anymore.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, the biggest goal I have right now, is to help people where it's not affecting their day-to-day life anymore.
That's
The
good.
self-esteem issues, the self-worth issues,
Mm-hmm.
people accepting bad relationships the same way I did, because they felt like they didn't deserve anything better. They felt like they didn't deserve real love because of what they had been through.
Yeah. Or they don't know what it is. They just
Yes.
they don't know what it is.
And they've
Rebecca, you're a
equated abuse.
badass. You're a
They've equated
badass.
abuse to a love because that's what they're so used to.
Yeah. Yeah.
They're used to the up and down cycles of the being abused and then the I'm sorry, and to them that I'm sorry is real love.
Yeah. Yep. I'm on your side. I think you're an amazing woman, Rebecca. You're
Thank
definitely a
you.
badass. Yeah.
Thank you.
Rebecca, please, one more time before we get off here, tell us where they can find you again.
My name is Becca, Becka, Scotland on Instagram. I can also send you a link for the YouTube page and my website if you want to post that as well.
Do that, and
And
I'll post it on the banner later.
yes,
Yep.
because I know like the YouTube channel, it's a little bit weirder on how to find it because it
Mhm.
is a newer channel. You don't get to get your URL exactly how you want it until you get so many subscribers. So that's their own little
And I'm
thing
dealing
right
with the
now.
same thing, yeah.
Yeah,
But I just want to be able people to be able to reach out to you to get a hold of you if they would like to connect with you for the life coach thing and, get some help in their life. So,
definitely,
yeah.
definitely,
Definitely.
definitely.
Thank you for such an amazing opportunity to interview. I appreciate it so much,
Oh,
and
you're welcome, and thank you for having me.
hopefully we can talk again.
Yes,
I'd
yes,
like
I
I'd like to
definitely
interview you
have a
again.
lot more to share.
Okay,
Definitely
that
have a
sounds
lot more
great.
experiences. And I could definitely share more on just the childhood traumas of losing pretty much my entire family, my grandparents at a young age, my grandmother taking care of family, a sick, dying family member. Just that was its own set of traumas in itself.
Yeah. Well, they're raised differently too, and they don't know how to break those cycles that they were stuck in as well, just kind of
Right,
passed on. So
right.
so anyways, thank you, Rebecca.
Thank you.
Have a great day.
You too.
Okay, bye.
Bye.